you have any questions or clarifications you want to know, you are free to. Okay, thank you, Dr. Shanmugam. There's a question? No. Our next speaker is Professor J.C.B. Abraham, College Madurai. Of course, he has retired for about 10 years now. He is a quintessential professor, especially when it comes to teaching evolutionary biology. Now I call upon Professor Abraham to present his talk.
Professor Pichappan, the organizer behind this, Professor Shanmugasundaram, distinguished members of the academic world, ladies and gentlemen, and my young student friends. The topic assigned to me is origin of man and languages. These are two vast subjects, and I shall try to compress them within the short period allotted to me. Alexander Pope, in his essay on man, said, "The proper study of mankind is man." This gives man a privileged position which biology does not support. Actually, the opposite is true. If you want to have even a basic understanding of man, then you must understand the evolutionary history of mankind. Our Earth and our solar system originated 4.5 billion years ago, and living organisms came into existence about 3.5 billion years ago. And for the next 2 or 2.5 billion years, there were only the primitive organisms, the microbes, the amoebae, and so on. The protists. The cellular organisms and the lower invertebrates and others, as we can detect them in the fossil record, started only about 1,000 million years ago. And on this scale, man's ancestors started branching away from our ape cousins just about 3 million years ago. And these ancestors are known as Australopithecines. There are a whole set of species. And they were the branch which evolved later into present-day man. And contrary to popular opinion, man became man not because of his brain, but because he was bipedal, as we say. He was erect and walked on his hind limbs. And at that stage, about 3 million years ago, man's brain capacity was an average of about 490 cc, whereas a gorilla or a chimpanzee had a brain size ranging from 650 to 700 cc. So the brain was much smaller in the original ancestor of mankind. And so it is this bipedal structure. The reason is it left the forelimbs, hands, free so that it can be used for, first of all, using tools, and then for making tools, and then using his grip either as a power grip or as a precision grip. He could use it for technology, use it for writing, so on and so forth. And this Australopithecus, our ancestors, were small organisms. They're just about 5 feet tall, weighed less than perhaps 100 pounds. And so they had to hunt for these animals. And so it has been suggested they must have hunted in groups. And these small groups were hunters and gatherers who lived in caves and lived in groups for just about 20 or 25. For the vast majority of human evolution, starting 3 million years ago, for about 99.98% of the time, there were these small groups. One chief, one leader, his 2 or 3 sons, daughters-in-law, grandchildren. It was this small group which lived in the caves formed the unit of evolving mankind. And about 500,000 years ago, we find that man has moved to Java and to Peking. Textbooks will speak about the Java man and the Peking man. So it looks as if by about 500,000 before this time, he developed sufficient technology to leave his home in South Africa and East Africa and migrate either through the sea, perhaps through the seas. And that's how perhaps they came to South India and went on to Fiji and other Pacific islands. And if you compare the biology and physiology of a chimpanzee or a gorilla and man, chimpanzee being our nearest relatives, you'll find that there's hardly any anatomical difference. Item for item, every part in the human brain has a corresponding part in the ape's brain. The proportion may be different, the relative size may be different, but man's brain is not unique. That's one of the basic facts that evolutionary biology tells us. On the left side of our brain, you have a region called the region of Broca, which is the region which gives human beings the capacity for language. Now, the apes also have a corresponding area. And there's another area that further behind, the area of Wernicke, which is concerned with hearing. And when these two areas are affected, we have the deaf and dumb people. Now, if the apes had these areas, Broca and Wernicke, why is it that they're not able to speak like human beings? Sociologists, linguists, and even some biologists would say, now there is an unbridgeable chasm between mankind and ape kind. It will be the thesis of this talk that this dichotomy is fundamentally wrong. It is a false dichotomy. There may be differences in degree, but not difference in kind. Why is it that apes can't speak? One reason is that their larynx, their voice box, is way up in the trachea. For man, it is further down below, so that the resonating column is greater in man. And then if you look at the jaws of an ape and a man, the rami, the two branches, are much more parallel in the apes, but you have a very nicely arched dental arcade in the human being, which gives a larger area for the vibrating air column to be fine-tuned. And then a third important difference is, in apes, the front part, the anterior part of the tongue is attached down with a strong muscle to what is known as a simian shelf, right here below your lower jaw here. Now, this is absent in human beings, and the tongue is attached to the floor of the mouth by a set of small mammillae, which allows a great deal of versatility in the movement of the tongue. And therefore, you have a physical apparatus in man which is able to produce different tones of sound, several phonemes, and then how to modulate the voice. And this versatility gives man, or even human child, the capacity to speak. Now, the question is, do the apes with their region of Broca and region of Wernicke, are they able to speak or not? Or are they subhuman? Let us think of our less fortunate human beings, the deaf mutes. They can't speak. Now the question is, are they human or subhuman? If you put the dumb mutes in the same level as human beings, then you can't deny that to the apes. I mentioned the very close similarity between apes and man. I will just mention one example. In hemoglobin, you have in the beta chain a whole sequence of amino acids, 146 amino acids in one particular sequence, not a jumble of 146 amino, but one particular sequence. And this hemoglobin between the human hemoglobin and the chimpanzee hemoglobin differs in just one amino acid. The probability of this coming by chance is there are about 20 amino acids, and so it will be 1 by 20 into 1 by 20 into 1 by 20 for 146 times, which is an astronomically high number. So this cannot be come by mere chance, it is by common descent. And if our brain structure, our vocal structure, our bodily structure, our bodily physiology is very similar to the apes, then we cannot deny they are being brought into the human family. As a matter of fact, there has been a very serious suggestion that in contrast to the present classification, the apes in the family Pongidae and man in the family Hominidae, the chimpanzees at least, perhaps the chimpanzees and the gorillas should be brought into the family Hominidae, and the orangutan and gibbons left to the Pongidae. Now, this being the situation, how did language originate in man? There are several suggestions. The Bovo theory, man imitated animals, or the ding-dong theory, man imitated natural sounds. But the consensus today is that it was the gestures. Australopithecus, as I said, was just about 5 feet tall, and he had to hunt larger animals, fears, baboons, and others. And so perhaps he had to get 2 or 3 bands together to fight the carnivorous enemies. And in their general headquarters, perhaps they had a consultation. They spoke to one another in gestures. And of course, when the actual conflict took place, then the tactics had to be differentiated, and they used some primitive guttural voices compared to, in addition to gestures. And now we have several laboratories in the Western universities where chimpanzees are being taught English language. They call it the American language of the deaf mutes. Here what they do is, like we do with our human children, you show an object and then the instructor molds the hands of the chimpanzee in a particular way, for which, if it does it properly, the chimpanzee is rewarded. For example, to teach the word hat, the hand is lifted up, held by the instructor, and the head is tapped repeatedly. This is what is known as molding. In course of time, this tight hold on the chimp's hand is slowly reduced. We call it fading, and ultimately, with or without reward of a trophy, this chimpanzees, when you say hat, it will tap its head. And if it wants a hat, it will tap its head. It can communicate. It started with just one word, and one chimpanzee called Washoe has a vocabulary of 150 to 180 words, and it uses these 180 words in various combinations, genuine combinations. Some chimpanzees are taught languages with symbols, plastic pieces, different shapes, different colors. Each one is a symbol for a particular word, and these chimpanzees are made to arrange them to form a sentence. And as the linguists say, Charles Hockett had a set of 7 characteristics for the human language, and the people who work with chimpanzees are of the opinion that they have practically all the 7 characteristics, like duality, productivity, arbitrariness, interchangeability, specialization, displacement, and cultural transmission. Because of the briefness of time available, I will mention just 1 or 2. Displacement. Now this is talking about situations far removed from the space and present time. There was one particular chimpanzee whose favorite was orange. So it asks the lab technician by its gestures, give me orange. And so they open the shelf, they open the fridge, and there is no orange. And then this chimpanzee said, you go car, give me orange soon. See, this happened some year ago when this chimpanzee was taken by car to the fruit market, and they purchased an orange there and came back. Now, a year after that, so far from the market, this chimpanzee is able to say, go to the market and bring me some oranges, hurry up, in a hurry. And then some of the apes can make statements of a fairly advanced logical nature. They can use the if-then meaning of sentences. One ape, chimpanzee called Sarah, a plate of fruits was placed there, and the task was for her to assign, to pick up a proper named fruit. For example, apple. If this took the apple, through sign language they say, now you pick up the apple. And this understands, and in response, it will pick up the apple. But before doing that, this ape Sarah said, if Sarah take apple, then Mary, that's the technician, give chocolate Sarah. If Sarah take banana, which is a mistake, if Sarah take banana, then Mary no give chocolate Sarah. Now, gentlemen and ladies, if this is not language, I would like to know what is language. And then there is this cultural transmission. In the laboratories where these chimpanzees were taught, they were all these sign language speakers. Though they spoke English, they always spoke in sign language. And So the chimpanzees, whether they are spoken to or not, they were living in an ethos where sign language was spoken. Now they wanted to know, this Washoe with this vocabulary of about 180 words, what will happen if you put them in a cage along with some absolutely new young chimpanzees who did not know any spoken language, the deaf and dumb language. And to the great delight, these people found that this chimpanzee Washoe was teaching these young ones this American Sign Language. And after a while, the technicians could talk to these students of Washoe. And so, I think I will stop here. And so my conclusion here is, it is not feasible anymore to deny language capacity to apes. It may not be on the same scale as human beings. No chimp, I dare say, will compose a sonnet of Shakespeare or a couplet of Thirukkural. But that will be making impossible demands on chimpanzees. Now, chimpanzees and mankind are the two extremes of a continuum. There is no gap. Reference was made to René Descartes this morning. He rendered a great disservice to these apes, saying that they do not have true language. And even some biologists, those two high priests of evolutionary biology, G.G. Simpson and Theodosius Dobzhansky, who ought to have known better, said that there is an unbridgeable gulf. Washoe and her other speaking chimpanzees are a standing refutation of this. And one concluding sentence. We are spending so much money on galactic travel. We are trying to find out whether there are intelligent beings there with whom we can talk. For a minuscule amount of that budget, if only we could develop this language transmission to our lower relatives, the chimpanzees and the gorillas. And if we are able to make them talk and reply to us, not just in a few laboratories in America today, but if it becomes a common phenomenon, it will be a great achievement. When you talk to a little child, then you realize what it means to be an adult. When you talk to a mentally retarded person, only then you understand what it means to be a normal human being. And only when you talk to a chimpanzee and listen to its reply, only then will we understand what it is to be human. Thank you.
I have a fundamental question for you. From the presentation, I understand that you believe in the African origin of man and then migration to various places.
Yeah.
Then when did he develop this technology to migrate from Africa to Java, which is divided by a vast stretch of ocean, or to Sikkim, again vast stretch of land? And then does it correlate with the continental drift, where he could have been standing in one place and drifted like that?
Professor,
one more point to consider.
Yeah.
The recent evidence of human genome does not definitely assert the African replacement hypothesis or the multi-foci origin. Where would you...
ended something like about 50 million years ago, long before man came out of her. So the continental drift does not come into this picture. Man is too recent a creature, less than 3 million years. The continents stopped drifting long before that. So that does not. And this modern genome shows that this very charismatic character, the mitochondrial Eve or the African Eve, she's a much more interesting character than her mythical counterpart in the Garden of Eden. The present consensus, there will be always difference of opinion. The consensus is that the mitochondrial DNA supports this origin from Africa, and there might have been multiple invasions starting from Africa. Whether they are multifocal or unifocal, there again I would say the consensus today will be, experts will always disagree, and we go by the consensus from day to day.
Doctor, could you kindly consider this particular aspect of stress
On
today?
your genetic basis, a small incident which will go off like water off a duck's back, to most individuals, to one particular person, it will come as a big stress. Now that is an individual genetic variation. It's unfortunate, and so long as you allow for the universality of variation, there will be always some cases like this. That is the fact of nature. You may deplore that, but we can't say whether it's right or wrong, because the one lesson that evolutionary biology teaches is a very, very hard lesson, that nature does not care for you, Professor Aruna, or for me. Nature is indifferent. Nature is pitilessly indifferent. In this process, undeserving people are going to enjoy some benefits, and some very good people are going to get hurt. Why? There's no answer. There's no rhyme, no reason. Nature, that evolutionary biology gives us, is ruthlessly indifferent. We can deplore this fact, but there's no remedy for that.
There are two more questions. Yeah, please.
Respectable Professor, as I understand, the philosophy suggests that the world comprises, or the world is based on only 5 components. Then computer field is comprising only 2. Biology is based on only 4, as said by Professor S.S. Then you told that we will have to shift apes or something from the lower order to the human being.
In classification.
Classification. My contention is the very classification itself is wrong in the sense it is only a continuum.
It is a
Continuum only.
continuum, right?
It cannot be a discrete variable.
Right.
It is only a continuous variable.
Yeah.
Like that, many physiologists who conducted experiments on animals, they have learned the characteristics of animals and they evolved theories and generalized it to human beings also, including Russian physiologists.